Now today on Stitchers TV, I'm going to show you how we can transform a regular but rather nice man's shirt into this. Right, as usual, I'm still making this up as I go. So, now I know I want to chop off this stiff collar because that would annoy me. But there's a separate piece here that does this sort of stand-up collar, and I think I'm going to like it better as a stand-up kind of mandarin collar. And I'm just going to chop it off and accept that there'll be a little bit of a frayed edge. But so long as I don't go below that piece for the mandarin collar, any fraying is not going to go further than that. And I think it will look quite nice with a bit of a frayed edge. So there we go. Looks alright like that, doesn't it? Now, I have tried this on and the sleeves are really, really long. So there's no way I'm going to wear them like that, but I might wear them if they're a little bit 3/4 length. So, in order for that to happen, I'm going to have to cut them off. So I'm doing it, so I trace out. So I'm going to trace out the line on this side, the line of the sleeve seam. Now the reason why I did this is because I want to keep all of that loveliness down there. So I want to keep that placket, I want to keep this kind of cufflinky thing here. So that's why I'm shortening the sleeve, not from down there, but up at the shoulder. Okay, now we put a little notch. Where is that notch? We put a little notch to show us where we have to join it to the shoulder seam. So I'm going to have to relocate that notch because I'm going to cut it shorter now. So whatever shape I have on my sleeve, so if you have a look, so it's a bit smaller there than at the back. So this is the back. I know this is the back because I've got the placket there at the back. So I'm going to copy exactly what they did, but I'm going to do it much lower down. So I'm going to go about there. So I'm going to trace out whatever sleeve shape is here already. So it's sort of roughly like that. Going like that. And I'll stop there. And then I've got to trace out the same as they did underneath. So I'm going to have to push that out of the way a little bit. Whoops. Okay. And then wherever that notch was, I've got to put it in the same place. So it's a little bit off centre. Now, when you do your notch to signify where it meets up with that shoulder seam, remember it's not the centre of the shoulder because there's a yoke on the shirt. So this shoulder seam falls a little bit forward, all right? So your notch won't be in the middle of your sleeve, your shoulder part of your sleeve. You might find it easier to put your sleeves right sides, so I've got back sides together there, and then you can sort of trace out one of them. So I'm just tracing them out both the same, knowing that I've then got to turn it over to trace out the front of the other one, because remember it's a bit different. And then I've got to put my notches, so it's a little bit off. Right, so what happens is that these sleeves will go on here. So in order for us to have access into there, we need to cut down here a little bit. So I'm going to cut down that seam just a bit, okay, just so I can get access into there. Oh, cut the other side as well. Not all the way down, just a bit. Okay, so what you should have is your sleeves cut off. You've done slits down the side seams, but not necessarily all the way. And there's a reason for it, you'll find out in a minute. And then you've got your two sleeves that have been reshaped, okay? Now, I want a kind of frilly thing to go around the shoulder. And I've got this leftover stuff here, so I think I'm going to use that. So I'm just going to accept that it's going to have a raw edge, and I'm fine about it. So I'm just going to chop off these thick bits. And I've got my not my sleeves, but my original bits of sleeves. I've got them right size together, and I'm just going to cut them the same thickness, but you do whatever thickness you want. So I know it's not a long strip or anything, but that's fine, because I just want to make the best use of the fabric and use as much as possible. So I've just followed that shape. Now we're going to gather these shapes, okay, but I just want to tell you something first. So the bit where it curves in is where you're going to do the gathering, because we are going to be putting one of them onto here, and if we do it this way round, we'll get a bit more of a frill, okay? So you can just take my word for it. So on each one of these, you're going to use your largest stitch, which for me is 4 on my sewing machine, and I'm just going to not go backwards and forwards and just sew about 1/2 centimetre away from the edge, and I'm going to do it to both bits on this bit where it curves in. Right, there isn't really a right and a wrong, well there is a right and a wrong side, but you can hardly see, so I'm not going to care about it. So I'm not going to go backwards and forwards, I'm just going to sew 1/2 centimetre away from the edge. Now I would use my ruffler foot, but I want everybody to be able to do this, and I know that you don't all have a lovely ruffler foot. So we're going to use the gather method, where we just pull the thread. So stop a little bit away from the edge. Don't go backwards and forwards, very important. Actually, before you get carried away and start gathering, can you do something for me? Can you find the middle of this piece of material and put a notch there? Because it's easier to do it now than afterwards. And then when you've done that, if you start gathering, so that's pulling one of your threads, not both of them, so you get this lovely gathered effect. Okay, so do that all the way along. Now when you think that, so I folded it where the notch was, just so I can get a rough idea of them more or less being the same. And then when you think that they're roughly the same, now you don't have to do this, but I think I want to do this. I just want to make it so that it gradually, although that's quite abruptly, goes into nothing. So I'm going to do that to the other side as well. Now when you're happy with it, if you want, you can do a tiny little stitch going along there, and that will stop the fabric from fraying anymore. And I'm not sure if I want to do that. Anyway, so do the same now onto your other piece of fabric. Do a gather, mark the middle, and then gather it. So when you've done that, you end up with these two lovely things. I did decide to do the little stitch about 2 mil or 1.5 mil, 1.5 millimeters away from the edge, so that it only frays up to there when it does fray. But the thing is, they look like this, but when they go onto a straight line, they're like that, which is much more kind of flouncy. Now, I'm just because it's not very long, I'm just going to hold where my notches match up and then flatten this lot out. Now using a normal stitch, so not a really big stitch, okay, you're going to sew your frill onto your shirt. I'm going to use a sort of 2.5, 3 size stitch. I'm going forwards and backwards and then making sure that it's gathered as much or as little as I want it to be. Just work my way around, but making sure that my notches for the shoulder line up. And then when I talk about it going off into nothing, what I mean is here, see that? I don't want it to be like that. I want it to sort of go off and disappear into the seam. And then you go backwards and forwards. So let's have a look at that. So when our sleeve goes in there, that will look like that, which is pretty good. Ooh, it's really nice. So that's what we've got so far. But we do need to trim off our excess fabric from around there. So I've just pinned the sleeve in place whilst I think about the balance of things. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a kind of false shoulder thing. Basically, I'm just going to add a frill onto the top. So I'm going to decide what the best line is for it, which I've sort of decided already. So I'm going to start about that frill width in because I want you to still be able to see this. So I'm just going to sort of draw a line, and look, I've got lines to help me. I'm going to come down there, and I think I'm going to go just below the sort of nipple, or on the nipple. Although my nipple's probably down there. Anyway, so I'm going to have to do that the same on the other side. But let's just take it round the back. So this is tailor's chalk and it comes off, hopefully. So I'm thinking how long my frill is and how I want to still be able to see that. So that's sort of determining where I put it. So you decide what you want to do and where you want to put your frills. You don't have to do the same as this. You could just do a 2-tier thing. I'm trying to squeeze it out of one shirt, so that's why I haven't just cut it off to the length that I want it to be and stuff like that. Also, I'm making it up as I go, so the less I cut as I go along, the more options I'm going to have, aren't I? So I do know that I want it to be short. I know that I want it to go to the hip bone here. Now, I also know that I want to keep this button stand. So I'm just going to start cutting off the button stand, oh, it's really difficult to see, with a seam allowance. So I'm not cutting it completely off. Okay, I'm just going to stop like that so you can see. So there'll be a frill which will be stitched onto the top, following my line there. And then the bottom tier will be attached onto here. But I want to make it look like it's still, naturally part of the button stand. So making sure that I'm cutting it straight, I'm just cutting that off like that. Now I'm going to have to continue around the back and do the same at the back and then come around. So if you don't know what I mean, so that's the piece that I cut out, the side that I cut out. So I'm laying it on top of the other side and I've got the fabric wrong size together, but it could be right size together. Making sure that all the edges match up, so it's definitely going to be symmetrical. And then I'll just cut along there so that I know that they're going to be the same. Now remember, I'm saving the button stand, so I want about 1 centimetre seam allowance going all the way down. I'm going to keep it really long until I know what I'm doing. So then do the same with the back as well. Okay, so that's the back piece. I'll fold it over so under the arm meets. So this is the back of the shirt now. I've folded it over, lined up my underarmy bits, and I'll chop that off. So this is what you end up with. I kind of like these long bits actually, but it's not going to be this short, and it's probably not going to have those long bits. So let's have a look at what we've got left, because what we need to do now, before we do anything else, is see about doing our frill here. See how much fabric we've got to do our frill. Now we can eat into another shirt, obviously, but I'm just curious to see how much I can get out of one shirt. Okay, so I've cut out 2 strips that are sort of 9 or 10 centimetres wide, and it's left me with this lovely long piece, which I know isn't going to be enough for the frill at the bottom, and we're probably going to have to introduce another shirt, so we'll deal with that afterwards. Okay, so at the moment we're dealing with this, and where I've got my little slits, do you remember where I slitted down the side seam? I'm going to ignore it, and I'm just going to do my gather line there, and it will be absorbed into the gathers, and it will be fine. And it's about a centimetre seam allowance, no backwards and forwards because we're going to gather it, and the largest stitch on the machine. And you just go straight from the middle, going all the way to one edge, and then do the same going the other way. So you end up with a gather stitch all along that edge on both sides. And remember, to gather, we just pull one thread. So it can be the top thread, it can be the bottom thread, but it can't be both of them. So if you want to have a closer look. So I'm just pulling the top thread in this situation. Now most people would tell you to do 2 lines of stitching. And the reason why is because if you've done loads of work gathering your threads and then it goes and breaks, at least you've got your other thread there to fall back on. Okay, after a couple of goes and changing my mind, I'm now doing it so it goes in a curve and then it just goes straight down at the back. And the way that I'm going to do it is I'm putting the fabric right sides together like this. So I've got my fabric gathered and I'm going to follow my chalked out line, but where you start here, allow a little bit extra because that will get folded back, and then it will go down, and then you'll hand sew it into place. So I've started at about half an inch or a big centimetre away from the edge, and I'm going to follow my rounded line and making sure that it's gathering as I go along, just this top frill bit. Now for the bend, you need a lot of gathers there. So I'm following it all the way around the bend. Now this big seam allowance, I might trim it back afterwards when I'm really short. Has got a finish on the edge there. So you need to bear that in mind with your sort of gathers and stuff, but I think we're going to be okay. And then try and head straight down. That's the thing about having lines on your fabric. It really shows when you're not straight. Now I feel quite confident about this, so I'm going to go backwards and forwards at the end. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to trim off all the excess stuff, take away any little bits of thread like that, and then give it a really good press. So when you've removed all the dodgy bits of thread and you've trimmed it back and you've pressed it, it should look a bit like that. Okay, this isn't attached, I've just pinned it to the dummy, so I think that's okay-ish. Now I've got to try and do exactly the same on the other side. So what I've done is, I've put a pin here, can you see that? And what I'll do is I'll hand sew it just to about there, I think. So do the same to the other side as well. So remember, we've got to attach it So we're going to attach it right sides together, okay, right sides together with the fabric, leaving a little bit of an overhang, because what you're probably going to do is that's probably going to get tucked underneath that front there. So trace it out, roughly work out how much of a frill, how much gathering you need, and make sure that it fits before you start. Right, so this is what we have so far. Looks pretty symmetrical to me. That red chalk's a bit worrying, but I'll worry about that later. The back, I'm quite pleased with the back. Took a while to get there, but I quite like it. So there we go. So that's the back. Now, we've got to talk about attaching the sleeve, okay? And I want to tell you something. Okay, so get one of your sleeves. Now make sure you're going to be attaching it the right way round. Move your frills out the way. So obviously this is the front, and then the placket goes at the back. So originally I made a notch which lined up with this sort of shoulder seam that comes to the front a little bit. So I'm going to line up my notch with that now. So I line up my notch with that, and then moving all my fabric out of the way, I'm going to sew from that notch coming down the armhole, but I'm not going to go all the way to there. I want to stop about an inch away from there, which is the seam of the sleeve, okay? So you're going to start at that top where your notch meets that shoulder seam, which isn't quite the shoulder seam. So you're going to use a straight stitch. So I'm just lining everything up. I don't need to do any easing in this situation. So I'm just sewing, making sure that I definitely go into the well of the stitch line that I did before, okay? So I'm coming down. So I'm now coming towards the armpit. But it's very important that I stop about 2 centimetres away from my underarm seam, okay? So I'll come off, and then I've got to flip the fabric around. And now I'm going to sew going the other way, and I'm going to over sew where I just sewed a minute ago. I don't want to go all the way to that edge. I want to stop about an inch or 2 centimetres away. Right, the reason why we stopped where we stopped is because we want to know how big to make the armhole. So if I take that to there, and then I put a little notch, and then if I take the other one to there as well, and I put a little notch, then I know I can put my side seams of the actual top together, and if I make them straight, stitch down there. Now I'm going to come out a little bit because I want it a bit A-line, but I can stitch down there, and then I can put my sleeve, finish off putting my sleeve in, and it will fit. So I'm just going to stitch down the side seam with my notches aligned, because then I know that it will be perfect. Woo. It's pretty good. And do you know what? The fashion student in me really likes it like this, but I know that I won't wear it like that, okay? Now there is a little bit of a drop going down towards the back, but I'm not sure that I mind about that. So the next plan was to get the bottom of the shirt and then attach a frill. So I'll gather it on. So I'm going to gather it on first, and then I'm going to do that overhang, and then I'll probably hand sew or maybe machine sew. Okay, so For the frill at the bottom, I've had to introduce just one more shirt and I'm going to use it to be the frill that forms at the back. But I need to join the pieces together, so I'm going to do that as a French seam. Very, very easy. So we put our fabric wrong sides together, and the bit that has to definitely match up is the hem. So I'm going to match that up first. And sew straight down. Now it doesn't matter what seam allowance you do because you're going to trim back your excess fabric. Now the important part there is that your fabrics were wrong sides together, and then you're going to turn it over and you should give it a press, and then you're going to do the same thing again. This time you're going to be a bit attentive to your seam allowance. So long as it's bigger than your fabric that you have inside, you'll be all right. So backwards and forwards, and then when you've pressed that, that's how you do a lovely French seam. Whew. The main difficulty about doing some upcycle projects isn't actually the making and the upcycling of it, it's the decisions, because you've only got so much of the stuff that you're working with. Anyway, so now what we do is we do exactly the same as we did before. Gather this fabric. We're going to start in the middle of the back. Is that the middle of the back? Yeah. The middle of the back, we're going to do one line, or you can do two lines if you want to be good. And then you're going to gather it up to fit the space, and then we're going to attach it. But the first thing I'm going to do is my gather line using a large straight stitch, just as we did before. So we've got our top and we've got our frill, and we do what we did before. Now I think I'm going to take this pin out. So do you remember we had to flip it over and put it right sides together? We left quite a big extra bit going over that sort of placket at the front. I'm going to put a pin there, or rather a needle, just so I can keep track. Now for my shirt today, the pattern changes around the side seam. So I'm going to match up the side seam, and then I'm going to start moving around my gathers sort of into groups. Now you can either just work in stages and sew from there to there, which is probably what I will do, or you can pin it all round and then stitch it on using a straight stitch. But you've got to stitch, as we did before, in the well of the stitch of your gathers, and you want your machine to be on number 2.5 or 3, the stitch length. Now because I'm impatient and I really want to see what it looks like, I'm going to start stitching on now. So I'm not going to go backwards and forwards. I've got the machine on stitch size 2 or 3, but what is important is that I stitch in the well of the gathered stitch line. And you really do need to make sure that your fabric underneath is flat, okay? That is important, because it won't look nice if it's gathered underneath. So I'm just arranging those a little bit. Now as I come towards the front, I've got to make sure I stop in the right place, which is probably near where that pin is, because I don't want to stitch over the placket. Right. So I'm just going to go up to it, and I'll probably go backwards. Okay, that's pretty much looking how I thought it was going to look. So I'm going to carry on doing it all the way around. I've stitched my frill on, the bottom frill on, all the way round, and it looks really, really good. But before we do anything else, you can't do it with this upper frill, okay? You're going to have to sort of stay stitch that a little bit yourself by hand, but you can do this with this one, all right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to mitre up to where we stopped sewing, like that, and then we're going to pretend that we're dealing with a straight line. Okay, so I need to stitch it straight down there. But I think to make my life easier, I'm going to trim this back a little bit so I can keep track more of what I'm doing. Now this is actually the side where I have this kind of plackety bit, and I really would like to get in there, but I'm just going to have a fiddle with that. But if you can't do that, all you have to do is just lay it down. So we've mitered it, we're laying it down, and we're just going to sew straight down there, and no one will see because of all the stripes. Right, I'm breaking my own rules here because I always say you have to have the fabric on the left all the time, but I need to be able to get right in here. So I've got to go right to that mitered bit, right? So right to that mitered bit. I'm going to go up and down there. I can barely see what I'm doing because I'm in a funny angle. But let's see what it's like. So I'm not making too much of an effort to get right inside the plackety thing. I'm just focusing on doing this. And because I'm at this rubbish angle, it's going all over the place. Oh. Right, let's have a look. You'll get the idea. So look, what happens is, when we do that, do you see, it takes care of that corner really, really well. So, we are done, and this is it. I think it's amazing, even if I say so myself. Got a very nice back going on with a kind of contrast. See the contrast? I did try and squeeze it out of one shirt, but I couldn't really do it. Now I've got this pink chalk thing going on here, and it is tailor's chalk, and I don't normally use tailor's chalk. I normally use kiddie chalk, and it won't come off, but I'm assuming it will come off in the wash, which I'm gonna do because I want to get all my bits all fluffy, my raw edges. Now you want me to try it on, surely? Yeah, of course you do. Oh, that's really nice, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Now I've left these long bits because I can't decide what I want to do about them. So can you comment below and tell me, should I cut them off? Should I tie them in a little bow thing? I thought it might look quite cute with a little bow thing down there. Or should I do a sort of belty thing at the back? What do you reckon? It's quite nice, you must admit. I'm a bit speechless actually. This whole upcycling, refashioning thing, really, you can get very professional results. You've just got to really plan it. Not that I did, I made it up as I went, but you would have more time and you could plan it, and you can come up with some very, very nice things. Now, if you think it's too tricky for you to do the way we did this, but I don't think so, I think it's easy, you just got to reverse it. Then you can always do it so you have the raw edge there. Now, I'm very much looking forward to how this looks when it's washed, because then I can really embrace all the raw edges and it will really come to life. Thank you so much for watching Stitchless TV. Now, we've got loads of upcycle and refashion sewing tutorials, and I really think I ought to put them in a playlist. Now, if you like this kind of thing, again, can you comment below and tell me? So if you want me to do more upcycle refashion videos, tell me and I will. Got to do my pose, and I can put cufflinks on here. Oh, that's going to look so good. Thank you so much for watching Stitchless TV. We've got more than 150 sewing and upcycle tutorials, all free on Stitchless TV. See you again very soon. Bye.